they're entertaining enough.
I think they will be, because we're going like books we don't necessarily recommend, or maybe a narrow recommendation or something.
Yeah. I have one where I'm like, I wouldn't recommend this, but it's bananas, and I do love a bananas book.
That's kind of how a couple of mine are. I think 2 of my 4 are ones that I'm like, I don't think I'd recommend this, but like they're just it's more fun to talk about than to read, probably.
Yeah. And I have a couple where the plot summary is so intriguing that people are going to want to read it anyway, even though I guarantee that it's not going to hold up. The actual experience isn't going to hold up to the promise.
Yeah, listen, don't do it, but I guess you're gonna. So whatever. I don't know what to tell you. Well, do you have a traditional a traditional joke to start us off with?
Yeah, I have a traditional joke. I actually have several, and I'm struggling to pick the one that I want to tell you today. But I think.
Oh, I was gonna say we could go like theme of the show. You could just tell me briefly about each one, and then I could pick the one.
No way. I'm not spoiling them. No way.
Yeah, how do you tell a joke? It's like when someone talks about riddles, and they're like, "Have you heard of one where the doctor's a woman?" And you're like, right. Well, no, but you just told me the whole thing, so.
Not worth it now.
Now I have, yeah.
Yeah. Plus, I don't trust you not to Google. You're a librarian at heart. I know you. You would Google.
Do my joke research.
That's right. So I think I'm going to tell you this one. What do you call a Frenchman wearing sandals?
I don't know.
Philippe Philop.
That one got me. That one's very silly.
Excellent. Yay. I like it.
Well, everybody at home, welcome to, or in the car or wherever, welcome to Why Did You Read That? Where we talk about some books and kind of ask each other directly, or sometimes just imply the question, why did you read that? I'm Peter.
And I'm Megan.
And we kind of have a theme for today.
We do. It's a little different.
Yeah. Based on something that I was considering talking about last time, we're going to talk about some books that maybe we don't necessarily recommend, but are interesting to talk about. Or, what we might call in the book industry a narrow recommendation. So maybe a very, very specific kind of reader would be interested in it.
Right. Right. Every book has a reader. It's just that reader may be rare.
Exactly. Yeah. Sort of like, when you watch Chopped and there's an ingredient on there and you're like, somebody out there loves that thing.
Mm-hmm. That really smelly fish.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, something that they're like, this is pretty much guaranteed to poison you unless you do it exactly correctly.
Right. What's that fruit that's banned off of buses in Asia?
Durian.
That's it.
Yeah.
People love that. Some people love it.
I know. It's so funny. Like, yeah, I've always wanted to smell what that smells like and taste it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I want to do either. So you'll just tell me when you smell it, what you think.
I'll let you know.
Okay.
Be like, yeah, it's not too bad. Or I'll be like, no, it's gross. I can see why there are laws about when there's a fruit that smells so bad that there's a law about it. I mean, that tells you something.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think there's any, that doesn't smell so bad about it. Yeah, that's going to stink.
Probably not. Probably not. All right. So the way this usually works is each of us picks 4 books. And then, you'll pick the 2 of mine that you're most interested in, and I'll pick the 2 of yours that I'm most interested in hearing about. I think, did I go first last time?
I don't remember. I was trying to remember just now, and I don't.
Shoot.
Let me check and see what we talked about last week. I think you maybe did go first.
I think so too. So I think it's your turn to go first.
Okay. So Let's see. I have for my first book a book called Fury by Laurann Dohner, and it is part of a series called The New Species. It's a romance book about people who were genetically engineered with DNA of animals in some secret lab and like kept prisoner. And then they were discovered and they are no longer like they broke out. And now they have their own little like compound and they're trying to like join the world. And it's a romance between one of the scientists who worked there and one of the new species who is part some kind of cat. I don't remember.
All right. This is like a theme because you've talked about one before where it was like, was it people who transformed into animals? And there was
yes.
like a bear detective, child protective
bears
services.
Behaving badly.
Yes.
That was a traditional shapeshifter. These people don't change their shape. They just share characteristics.
Oh, gotcha.
So they don't actually turn into anything. They just like have, instincts and like better vision and that kind of thing.
Gotcha. That was your traditional shapeshifter romance. This is your
right. Right. This is stepping it up a little bit.
Fair enough.
Next, I have a book called Night Train by David Quantic, and this is I don't even know how to describe it. Okay, so did you see the movie Snowpiercer?
Yes.
It's kind of like Snowpiercer. It's the main character wakes up in a train filled with bodies and doesn't know how she got there, basically.
Okay.
Third book is Phantom Effect by Michael Aronovitz. And it is about a serial killer who is being haunted by the ghost of one of his victims.
All right.
And
finally, that's so funny, but I guess maybe it's like instant justice.
Right? It's like, it feels right.
I guess if you were a ghost who was murdered by a person who was murdered by a serial killer and became a ghost haunting your serial killer, it's either that or make pottery with someone you loved, right? I mean,
yeah. Do people still know that movie?
I have no idea.
I
feel like
do.
it was the biggest thing in the world at the time, and now it's like, I don't know if anyone watches that movie anymore.
Well, this is how I know I'm old, is I'm constantly making movie references that feel very contemporary for me, and there are a lot of people who are like, I've never even heard of that, and then I feel old.
Well, maybe Ghost. If you haven't seen Ghost.
There we go. Bonus recommendation.
Yeah, I guess I recommend it. I don't really remember it that well, but
Whoopi Goldberg was Oscar nominated if she didn't win.
I was going to say, she was hilarious in that movie.
Yeah, she was recognized for it, at least in some way. And then my fourth book is called Death Rides a Chestnut Mare by Ralph Compton.
Okay.
It's a Western about an orphaned girl who takes on the identity of her murdered father to find vengeance.
Okay. That seems outside of your typical reading.
It is. I actually read it because in my professional life, I am what we call a reader's advisor, and I make book recommendations to a lot of different kinds of readers. And occasionally I stretch my reading to get familiar with stuff I wouldn't normally read. And this is one that I read for that purpose.
Okay. I gotcha. Boy. Well, I think I definitely want to hear about Phantom Effect.
Yeah.
The ghost haunting their serial killer. So let's start there.
All right. I don't blame you at all, because I picked it up specifically because of what it was about. Like, it sounded really interesting to me, and sounded like something I would like. I enjoy horror and romance because they both are like the feelings genres, and that's what I like as a reader. I like to be made to feel things, everything from, swoony to terrified. Mm-hmm. So I picked it up because I was like, maybe this will make me feel terrified. So it is about this guy who is a serial killer, and I'm pretty sure that if not through the whole thing, through at least half of it, it's from his point of view. and it opens and he is driving a car down the highway, and I'm pretty sure he has the body of one of his victims in the trunk, and he's running from the police, and he pulls up at an abandoned shopping center. I don't know if it's a mall or like a Kmart, but it's a big, big building that used to be like a big box shopping store of some kind and is now empty, abandoned. So he pulls in and he goes in there, I assume to hide, and we know that the ghost of his victim is like following him. And I'm trying not to spoil it, because I know, even though this book, so spoiler alert, this book didn't work for me. I really wanted it to, but the reason that I read horror is so that I can feel some sense of dread or terror, like, oh, something terrible is going to happen. And the thing that I realized reading this book is when your main character is a serial killer, there's no terror. You're rooting on the ghost.
Oh, right.
You're like, yeah, get him.
You're like, I'm kind of on the side of the horror in this case.
Yeah. So I think it broke the book for me a little bit. I was like, oh, this isn't really working, because I'm like, yeah. There was no sense of atmosphere. It also opens in a way, like, if I think you're getting some flashbacks of him stalking the victim and like hunting her down and planning to murder her. But the book opens with her haunting him, and so that he succeeded, right? So even there's no suspense.
Oh, right.
Going in that she's not going to make it. Like, she's going to be a ghost. She's going to die.
Right.
So all of the suspense was kind of busted for me.
You're just kind of waiting for her to become a ghost, because you're like, well, that's where this is going, right? So.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. It's been a while, and since I didn't like it, it didn't stick in my brain as firmly as other books. But I want to say it might be set in 2 time frames. So you're like going back and forth. He's in the building being like hunted by this ghost, and he is stalking her in the past. So you're kind of going back and forth. But the thing is, in the first case, when he's stalking her, she's not going to live, because you're already in the present where she's haunting him.
Mm-hmm.
And in the second storyline, there's no suspense, because you want him to die.
Right.
Like, he's not a good dude. He's horrible, and you hope she wins. And so that feels more almost action-y to me.
Mm-hmm.
Except it didn't have all of the action sequences.
Oh, that's horrible.
I know. It was such a bummer, because the idea is really cool.
Yeah, it's kind of like making me think of Thinner by Stephen King. So, if I remember correctly, this guy gets cursed because he hits someone and kills them with his car.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of his fault, but kind of not, but kind of.
Yeah.
And so then you're like, some revenge is not out of the question here. And then, but over the course of the book, it kind of goes a little too far.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I feel like he's had enough. And also, I guess, like, hitting someone with your car is something that everybody is like, I mean, God forbid, but it's possible I could do that, not really intending to. Versus being a serial killer, where you're like, I mean, I don't, how much haunting can a serial killer get before you're like, okay, that's enough. I think
he's learned his lesson.
Yeah.
And I was going through my notes from back when I read it, and I don't remember what was bothering me, but I made a note that the voice of the main character, whose name is Serrano, bothered me. And I want to say that it was very like stiltedly formal, but I honestly don't remember. I just made a note that it was really irritating. So I'm not going to tell anyone not to read it. I'm sure there are people out there who found that it scratched just the right itch for them. But I do want to have people go into it with their eyes open, that it was not terrifying. So if you're really looking for a good edge of your seat horror novel, as cool as this one sounds, I just think that structurally it couldn't hold.
It almost makes it worse, right? When you're like, someone wasted this great premise, but the execution just didn't come through.
Yeah, I almost wish that they would have like scrapped all of the stalking stuff. Like he killed her. I'm in. He's a
Right.
bad guy. Like I don't need you to prove to me that he's horrible.
Right.
She's dead. He's the bad guy. So let's just get some like really good, creepy, scary, actiony stuff in the present where she's haunting him and trying to kill him, and make it really like gruesome and suspenseful. And then I think I would have been into it more.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there are ways that you could make it more effective too, right? Because like even if it's scary, even if you're not really invested in the serial killer surviving or whatever, if it's just genuinely spooky and stuff, or you're not totally sure what's happening for a little bit. Yeah. Well,
or even having like with another victim who he hasn't killed yet, and make her the main character, and he's being haunted by another victim.
Yeah.
I want someone out there who write me that book.
That's having your cake and eating it, because that's like, all right, so you have the ghost, trying to stop the serial killing, and then you've got the person that you're like, well, this person, it would be nice if they survived.
Yeah, someone to root for.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I was bummed because I read the back description of the book and I was like, ooh, cool, and then wah wah.
Yeah. Well,
but we do have it in the Hoopla collection, so anybody who wants to check it out, you can use a Hoopla credit on it if you want.
Yeah. I was just working on the HPLD Cult Movie Vault and was like, there's some things on Hoopla, like the movie Birdemic, where it's like they should halfway through a pop-up should come and be like, you could get this credit back right now if you if you click out of this movie. We understand. We'll give you your credit back.
I didn't realize Birdemic was on there.
Not only is Birdemic on there, but Birdemic 2 is also on there.
I didn't realize there was a Birdemic 2.
I didn't either. And then we watched about half of it, and it's worse than the first one.
So people who maybe don't know you may not realize this, so I'm just going to bring our audience in on a little secret, which is that you have a high tolerance for terrible movies.
It was one of the things that's really bad about Birdemic, which is a terrible, cheaply made, horribly scripted, just everything about it is wrong. Movie, and it's kind of like the trifecta of famous cult movies, I would say, like Birdemic, The Room, and for me, Fateful Findings.
Fateful Findings.
But the first, it's called Birdemic. It's about birds killing people, and I don't think a bird shows up for like the first 30 minutes of Birdemic 1, and Birdemic 2. I think we watched almost an hour and nothing happened. And it's like the same characters, except I don't think they're playing the same. It's like a reboot. It's not even like a sequel, but maybe it is a sequel and they all just forgot about what happened. It's like impossible to tell.
Well, I mention it because people who I want people to go in realizing that your tolerance for terrible is already high.
Yes.
So the fact that you're like, this was so awful I couldn't watch it.
Yeah.
That's astonishing.
It's pretty bad. I don't know if I could. I'm trying to think of a scenario in which I would be bored enough to watch it, and I'm having a really hard time. I'm on like a 20-hour flight, and that's just
and there's nothing else.
Yeah, and I can't use my hands to like read a book or just touch my fingertips to each other for the level of excitement that brings. So it's like, this is the only form of entertainment.
Have a thumb war with yourself.
Yep. Just count my fingers, make sure they're all still there periodically. Well, while we're on the note of my high tolerance for terrible.
Yeah, hit me.
Okay, so I've got 4. 3 of them are comic books.
Okay.
One is a book.
Okay.
So the first one is called Centipede Volume 1 Game Over.
That sounds promising already.
5-issue comic book series based on the arcade game Centipede.
Okay.
The next one is the aforementioned Army of Darkness Ash Saves Obama. And that is Ash from Evil Dead and Army of Darkness fame saving Barack Obama.
Right.
The next one is called Swordquest. This is also based on an Atari game. I guess it's like a sort of a fantasy comic series that went along with the games, and there's kind of a whole history of the games, and they did this big giveaway and all this other stuff going on. The last one is called...
So, wait, it's a history of the game?
No, it's like a fiction... It's like the fictional story of what's happening in the game.
Okay.
But also, Atari put out this series of games called Swordquest, and like you'd play the first game and there were hidden clues and hidden rooms and stuff in it, and there were also hidden things in the comics that would help you solve this puzzle, and if you were the first person in the world to solve this puzzle, you got like a sword or something, like an actual bejeweled sword.
So this is what happened in actual, like, in the world. This is not like, it might be in the book, but this actually happened.
Yes. Sorry. Okay. So like, Swordquest was
sorry.
Like
I'm confused.
It's so confusing because I can't think of anything that really worked this way. But what they did is the Atari put out a series of video games, and simultaneously, they're like, let's make this a multi-platform thing. So there were like comic books to go with it. I'm sure there was like a cartoon at some point.
Okay. So they were franchising it.
Yeah, and then each of the different games had like clues and answers to a sort of riddle in it, and then the corresponding comic books also had pieces of that puzzle. So what you'd have to do is like read the comic, play the game a ton, and find these hidden clues in each one in order to solve some puzzle that in real life, if you were the first person to solve it, you got like some fabulous reward.
So it's like Ready Player One, but instead of winning the internet, you win a sword.
Yes. Yeah, like Ready Player One, but since there was no internet at the time, they were like, we'll just give him a sword.
Okay, gotcha.
Close enough.
Swords are cool.
My last book is called Clownfellas, Tales of the Bozo Family. The cover is a guy who looks like, a Goodfellas. He's in a suit and he's got a hat and a red clown nose.
I mean, I'm starting there, right?
Fair enough. So this is a book called Clownfellas, Tales of the Bozo Family, by Carlton Malik III.
Oh, I should have known.
So he's kind of the godfather of the genre that we call Bizarro, which was, I guess, probably a late 90s, early 2000s is when Bizarro really kind of became as mainstream as it ever became.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Carlton Malik has written about 1 billion books, and like, to give you an idea, I guess some of the ones that I can actually say the names of, Satan Burger, Armadillo Fists, Tumor Fruit is, one of his. So anyway, Bizarro is like, I guess, maybe shock value literature. When I use the word,
I think that's fair to say. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's pushing boundaries.
It's weird and shocking, and so, like any genre, there's a lot of terrible. Bizarro, there's probably more terrible than some other genres, because I think some people who write in Bizarro just go for shock value, and there's like nothing else to it, and it doesn't even make sense. Mm-hmm. Carlton Malik is a little better. Like, his stuff, it has a narrative and you can follow it. And there have been a couple of his books that I was like, this is actually pretty good. Even though it's sort of embarrassing to read them because they have, hilarious covers like Clownfellas and stuff.
I mean, hey, you're talking to a romance reader.
Yeah.
I get about cover shaming.
Good point. So, Clownfellas I think might be his peak as far as like, this is probably the book that he's written that comes closest to being able, like a mainstream reader might be able to tolerate it.
So if you're looking to dip your toes into the shallow end of Bizarro, maybe this would be an entry point.
Yeah. Like the only thing that is really different about it as opposed to other Bizarro is it's fairly long. Okay. I think it's probably in the neighborhood of 400 pages. Let me see. Oh yeah, 450 pages.
That is long.
Yeah, most of his books are really short. They're like under 200 pages, and his kind of concept with them is it should take you about as long to read one of his books as to watch a movie. Because, you know, he's like, that's the kind of person, the kind of reader that I write for, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So Clownfellas is like a series of stories, but they feature a lot of the same characters and stuff. It feels a little bit like Pulp Fiction, maybe. Okay. And it's about a city that has a division in it. There's sort of the regular city, and then there's the clown city, which is known as Little Big Top. And that's where like clown people live. And so, you know, there's like clown people who do this and that. And of course, there's like a clown mafia. So this kind of follows some different characters who are involved with the clown mafia.
Question.
Yeah.
Are these just people who choose to be clowns, or are they innately clowns somehow?
They're like biological clowns.
Okay.
There is like I can't remember what it is now, but there's like something that you can feed a regular person, like, you know, some kind of cotton candy or something that will
cream pie that you can slam in their face.
Yes. And if you do that, they'll turn into a clown. But sometimes also they'll turn into like a berserker crazy clown. They'll completely lose their mind and just become a monster.
Okay.
So that's like the risk there, you know. So
sure. Everyone's favorite, a crazy clown.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, like, so they're biologically clowns, and they have like weird stuff, like, you know, instead of a normal gun, they'll have like a gun that shoots like, gosh, trying to think now what they had. You know, they just have like a glitter bomb or like an exploding pie and stuff like that. I mean, it's like clown themed stuff.
Do they drive really tiny cars?
They drive tiny cars, and they have like pack into them. You know what I mean? Like, and it's kind of funny. It's kind of weird because it's sort of like, you know, it's mostly told from the perspective of different clowns. And, you know, they have their sort of like racial terms for clowns and then for non-clowns and stuff like that. And there's a portion where it's kind of scandalous because there's a young lady who's very interested in a guy who's not a clown.
So and she is.
And she is a clown, and she comes from like, you know, a proud clown family. So they're like having to figure all this out, I guess.
So it's Romeo and Clown Juliet.
Kinda, yeah. So I guess it's like, you know, it's weird because the book almost would work without the clown element. Like, and that's why I think this is probably this writer's best book, because really without the clowning, that's definitely the Bizarro element of it. And it almost works without that. Like, you could probably do some minor edits and just remove the clowning entirely, and it would be a not terrible series of crime stories.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess, like, you know, it's just bizarre, and I can't recommend it to everybody because it's just too weird. Like, if you if you're listening to this and thinking like, no, I would never encourage you to like, no, give it a try, because I'm like, I have to acknowledge it's very weird. And if you go into it like already pretty sure that it's going to be too weird, it probably will be.
Yeah, trust that feeling.
Yeah. Yep. Trust your gut on this one. And, you know, like, I hate to say it, I enjoy this author's work a lot, but you're not missing out on a lot if you're like, that's just not for me.
Yeah.
But if you do like really weird stuff, and if you can also sort of say like, you know, the weirdness of it adds something for me, or like I'm just tired of reading the same book all the time, so I just need any way that's different.
Yeah.
That
I can get that. I think there's something to be said for a book that lands on the banana scale.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. You know, like we were talking about Chopped, right? It's like, well, I mean, do you want to eat a hamburger every day or a salad every day for lunch, or do you want to try something weird once in a while?
Yeah, you want to eat some durian.
Yeah, exactly. I'll take a crack at it. So there you go, Clownfellas, the durian of books. I wouldn't read it on the bus because everyone would probably be very curious.
Yeah. Yeah, you wouldn't get to read it because you'd be answering a lot of questions.
What are you reading? Why?
Is that for real?
How do you even acquire such a book?
You go to the library, that's what.
Yeah, good news. This one is on Hoopla as well.
Excellent.
I think we also have some of his other books in the library. I know we did at one point, and I'm not sure if we still do, but I believed we had Tumor Fruit at one time. I think we had Quicksand House.
Did he write Hammer Wives?
Hammer Wives, yes. And Cuddly Holocaust, I think, was one of his that we had.
I would like to point out that the only reason I'm this familiar with the works of Carlton Malik III is because I shared an office with you.
Yeah.
I have, in fact, never read this author.
You know, and I'm not entirely sure that I'm not the only one who checked out those books from. That's why I'm like, I think they're still, as far as I know, they're still there, but they certainly could have gone the wayside by now.
It's possible. Those books that languish, they tend to move on to new homes.
Yes, yeah. And I'm like, you know, what can I say? How can I blame people for not checking those out? I'm like, I mean, this is an entire library of choices, so I can't blame people for not making the same bad choices that I make.
Hey, if you had fun, it's not a bad choice.
That's true. I did have a good time.
Yeah.
Enjoyed reading Clownfellas. All right.
Do you need a reminder?
Let's see. I've got Fury.
Yes.
And that's the one about like crossbred,
genetically engineered humans with animal DNA.
And then there's Night Train, which is a lady wakes up on a train and there's a bunch of dead people.
Yep.
And Death Rides a Chestnut Mare, which is like a Western.
Yes.
Would you have more fun talking about Fury or Night Train?
You know, either one will be fine. I think Fury probably has more people who would enjoy it. That's one of those books that lands on the banana scale. Night Train, I think, was fundamentally a little bit broken.
All right, let's do Fury then.
Okay. So the book is Fury by Laurann Dohner, and it's the first Dohner or Dohner. I'm actually not sure. It's Dohner. It's the first in her New Species series, which we have at least several of in print in the library, and we can get the rest through Prospector, I'm sure. So if anybody wants to try these, they are in there. And the main character her name is Ellie, and she works for a pharmaceutical company. Kind of in the front office. She doesn't really see a lot of the higher up functions of this company. But somehow she discovers that they're doing illegal experimentation on humans where they're splicing human DNA with animal DNA, creating, of course, a new species.
Now, did they talk about, like, why?
You know, I'm trying to remember. There are two. So this is how you know romance is for the bonkers readers and why I'm so at home there. There are two series that I know of that are like this, and the other is by Laura Lee. So anybody who's read Laura Lee and liked those, I'd say these are kind of similar.
Okay.
So it's possible I'm misremembering and I'm remembering the Laura Lee plot line, but I think this is for military purposes. Like they're being created, for the army.
This is one of the things that makes me unhappy in narrative, because like, okay, Jurassic World, and they're like, let's make Velociraptor soldiers, and it's like, why? That seems like a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Like, even if it works, that seems like a bad idea, and it's not going to work.
It's not going to work. I mean, at least in this case, you have people with reason, like with higher level reason, although they treat them like, captive chattel slaves, like animals. So they're not exactly developing reason. So it's not like you can say like, hey, attack the enemy and then come back to us because you're on our side. Because
Because they'd be like, I think I'll just peace out if that's the way.
Yeah. But you know what, Peter? It's like this for romance reasons, and we accept that.
That's fine. Does the book go into how they acquired these people?
They created them.
Oh, so they're like created from scratch.
Yes, they are. I assume that the animal DNA was spliced into them in like fetal form. I'm not sure exactly. I mean, I don't think it goes into the hard science of it. Let's be honest. But
that's fine. You know what? I don't need it to do that, because I'm like, well, if you're just gonna make up the science anyway, like, just say, it just works.
I mean, Jurassic Park, they had the actual science behind it. They were like, we used amphibian eggs and altered them to grow dinosaurs, and then amphibians can change their sex. So that's how we got female dinosaurs, and everything went crazy.
That's one of my favorite parts of Jurassic Park, because like the cast is being the viewer, because they're like watching that movie on that thing on the ride. And they're all like, can we get out of this and go see the dinosaurs? Like, whatever. You did a bunch of science. Fine. Like, let's go see the dinosaur. And I'm like,
do you remember reading the book? Because the book has a lot of the science in the beginning. Like,
no, I don't think I ever read that book.
It was really good, but the science was solid.
I believe it.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it was just, I thought that was, what a hilarious translation to the screen, where they're just like, people want to see the T-Rex. Let's just get off this ride.
I think it was smart not to have them like in the lab discussing about how amphibian DNA has this innate, like, nobody cares.
Yeah.
They're dinosaurs. Cool, I'm in. And that's what this is. Like, okay, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
DNA, animal splice DNA. Okay, sure.
Okay. I was on the little ride. They were explaining how they did it, and I'm like, yeah. Let's go see Catman.
Exactly. And they have, I'm trying to remember I'm pretty sure they have like the big mammals, like the big predatory mammals are represented in this series. But it opens with Fury. And I don't think they have names when they're in the lab, but when they actually escape the lab, they all name themselves, and they're all things like Fury, because they have feels, Peter. They have feels about their existence.
All right.
But anyway, so Ellie is like a low-level person, and she kind of finds out that all of this illegal experimentation is happening. And I don't remember how, but she somehow manages to like infiltrate the like secret runnings of this business, and becomes a whistleblower. And Fury, who's the hero of the book, he sees her when she's like there undercover, and he identifies her as one of the enemy. Doesn't have any idea that she's there investigating and working with the government to put all of the bad guys in prison, right?
To do something, yeah.
Once right, to try and put an end to it. Yeah. So she's the one who kind of like breaks it all wide open and gets this company busted and frees all of the people. But he doesn't know that. He's been, chained up in like a box or a cell or something, and abused. There's, just as a content warning, there's implication of like breeding programs, and so like there's some squick factor to do with that. It doesn't go into detail. It's not on the page, but it's happening. So if that's something that would bother a reader, I would, keep that in mind. This is definitely on the bonker side of romance. So weird stuff's going to be happening. And if you want to read this, I would be on board with that. So the story really kind of gets going after the lab has been busted open and the new species have started their own kind of society. They have some sort of separate status from the government, like they're not citizens, but they're not prisoners, but they have some rights, and so they have like their own compound, they have a leader, and they're building their own society and kind of learning about their own biology a little bit because they've been in isolation and they don't even really know how this all works.
Sure.
And she, because she was one of the people who busted this open, she's one of the few humans who has like, some ssort of status with the new species, with the leaders of the new species. And so she's working with them somehow. I think I don't remember how she's a liaison or she's working with medical team or something like that. And he sees her and loses his mind because as far as he's concerned, she's one of the bad guys and she's infiltrating.
What is she doing here?
Exactly. Yeah. So he loses his mind, but he also has like a fundamental attraction to her because this is romance. And I don't know, you probably don't know this, but all my romance readers out there will not be surprised to hear this. Whenever you have some sort of animal related, like something going on in romance, like this, where there's a genetically engineered person with animal DNA, or you have some sort of a shapeshifter, it often comes along with the fated mate trope, which is, they have some sort of instinct where they can identify their mate. And so the implication here is that she is his fated mate, and he is feeling very torn because he doesn't trust her. And also there's like a species equivalent of like white supremacists happening where they're like, human first and you're unnatural and we're going to kill you all. So there's some suspense stuff going on and they're trying to like kill all of the new species, and she's in danger because eventually this is a romance, so no one will be surprised if they do start a relationship. And she's like a race traitor because she's with an animal, that is what they accuse her of. And so lots of weird bananas stuff happening. If you can like let go of reality and not expect things to feel real and just roll with it, it can be a lot of fun. But if you need things to have like some touch of this makes sense, then I'm not sure that this is one. Like, this isn't like your Clownfellas. I would say this is one that you would have to be able to like enjoy a little bit of weird.
Yeah, right. Right, like maybe this isn't something you can enjoy in spite of its weirdness. You have to kind of embrace its weirdness and have that as part of what you enjoy.
Yeah. I call these banana pants romances, and I personally love a banana pants romance, but even some of my romance reading friends, they can appreciate that I love them, but they don't necessarily want to read them themselves.
When you're talking fated mate, is that the name of the trope? I was thinking that sounds like maybe the version I'm familiar is like from Twilight, where I think the one person sort of imprints on the baby or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I just somehow magically know that that's my future mate.
Yeah. Usually it's through like some supernatural sense, or like sometimes it's smell or something like that. Yeah. It is absolutely that. I will say that in Twilight, I found that particularly icky.
I mean, it was pretty bizarre, but
yeah,
I don't know. I was just like,
I don't love a fully grown person being like, "Hey, this newborn baby, I'm going to marry." I'm like, ew.
Well, it's extra funny to me about that is it's like I heard that reaction more than once, but then I was like, but wait a minute, isn't this vampire also like 100 million years old?
Yeah.
And he's like dating a 17-year-old. That seems equally weird, if not more.
I think it's just easier to get past because she's walking, talking, reasoning person.
Yeah.
Very close to adulthood, whereas an infant it's just hard to get past the infant thing.
Yeah, I mean, how do you fall in love with an unborn baby? That's not your baby, I guess.
Someone who has not even grown their baby teeth yet.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's the fated mates trope shows up a lot in paranormals too. Like you'll have like vampires or whatever who also have like a fated mate. And I've read lots of different ways that registers. Either, they see in black and white until they meet their fated mate and then they can see in color, or their heart starts beating when they meet their fated mate. So they live, thousands of years with no heartbeat, and then they meet their fated mate and their heart starts beating and it feels like an earthquake or something. They're like, what the heck is that?
That's got to be very disconcerting.
Yeah. But yeah, lots of stuff like
doing
that.
A thing that
it
has not done in a long time.
Yeah, and it's all kind of shorthand for the hero developing feelings and not quite knowing what to do with them.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like there are versions of this, light versions of this throughout whatever.
Yeah, I think it's fairly common in storytelling. It's just very you see it a lot in romance. Romance hits a lot of the same beats. Like people don't always understand because they're like, why do you like romance? Because it always ends the same way. It always ends with them falling in love and being together. And that's not the point.
Right.
The point is not that, how is it going to end? The point is, how are you going to take two characters or occasionally more than two characters from point A to point B? And how are you going to get them in a way that makes sense and is exciting and is, feels emotionally real in some way, at least.
Sure.
To get them to that point. So,
I mean, I think, I get what people are saying when they say that, but at the same time, I feel like, when you watch like a comedy movie, it's like, well, what did you think was going to happen? Like Tom Hanks was going to murder someone and be haunted by their ghost and eventually get the electric chair? Like that's not going to happen. Yeah. Like
a mystery has a crime that gets solved.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not for everybody. I don't love mysteries, but the idea that it ends in a certain way or that the plot has the same beats, that's part of the appeal for readers who like that.
Yeah. Well, I think probably most people like that, even if they don't realize it. You know what I mean? Like, even you watch a, like the Dark Knight trilogy or something, and the way it ends, it's sort of like, maybe you wouldn't know the exact series of events, but if you were like, Batman kind of rides off into the sunset, and you're like, yeah, you're correct.
Well, and everybody's had that moment where you're like, he created the next villain, like when they zoom in on someone, you're like, the next bad guy, that must be him.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah.
Right. There's something satisfying about that. It satisfies our innate human need for storytelling, I think.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, that one, I don't know. That doesn't sound too bad. It just sounds...
I think the most normal, like it's the least broken of the ones that I picked. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
It works as a narrative and it's weird. It's kind of like your Clownfellas. Like it's weird and it's not for everybody, but it still works as a story. Whereas the other ones I picked sounded so great. And then for some reason in the structure or the plot of the story, it didn't end up working.
Yeah. You're just like,
so this is one that I could recommend to people, but not to everyone.
That's fair. I think that's a good recommendation style.
Thanks.
All right.
So you had the Centipede book.
Yes.
And the Sword something book.
Swordquest
book and the Obama book.
Swordquest has to be like the most generic fantasy title ever conceived.
I mean, it is like I imagine some sort of 80s movie with a 12-year-old boy who ends up getting sucked into a fantasy universe. It would be called Swordquest.
Yeah, exactly. First thought, best thought was definitely the working theory when they came up with that one. Sword, I don't know. It's like quest for a sword, sword quest, all one word. Perfect. Yeah. Go.
Label it. Yeah. Slap it on. Let's move.
Game's already finished, so let's just.
Well, I think I'm going to go with Ash Saves Obama because I was tempted last time.
Okay. Well, so here's the deal. I guess the character of Ashley Williams is a guy who started out in the movie Evil Dead, then Evil Dead 2, then Army of Darkness, and then the TV series Ash versus Army of Darkness.
Right. Great movies, by the way.
Yes. The movies are excellent. Evil Dead is kind of like a very indie horror movie, but that's still watchable.
Cult classic.
Yes. Evil Dead 2 is kind of a reboot of Evil Dead, but it's a little bit sillier, I guess.
Yeah, chainsaw arm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you've seen this character, or if you're not sure, if you've seen a guy who's kind of dressed normally, but then he has a chainsaw instead of a hand, that's the guy. And, you know, then Army of Darkness was my favorite movie as a child.
Yeah, my brother's too. I don't think you're alone.
Yeah, that was like the mainstream breakout movie for the character, even though lots of people prefer.
What's the actor's name?
Bruce Campbell.
Bruce Campbell. Thank you. It was bothering me.
Interesting tidbit I just learned. So Sam Raimi is the director of those. You know, he like directed all three of those. And later went on to like do Spider-Man and some other stuff. But so he made Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, and he couldn't get the money to make Army of Darkness. So he made a movie called Darkman with Liam Neeson in it, which is also kind of great. And then moved on to, and then that got him enough money so he could make Army of Darkness.
That's interesting, because I think Army of Darkness may be the one that most people know.
Oh, definitely. I think that's
so
probably
it's strange.
That's probably Sam Raimi's, like, the one he's most known for, even though it's not the most famous movie that he made.
Right.
If you've seen the Spider-Man, the first three, there's a scene where Dr. Octopus is like coming to life as Dr. Octopus, and it is like straight out of Evil Dead 2. The way the camera moves around, and it's like a little horror scene, and I was like, oh, he got to do his Evil Dead scene in Spider-Man. So anyway,
I love an Easter egg.
So there have been some spin-offs, including comic books. So they've done some weird stuff like Army of Darkness, Ash in Space, and like they're definitely doing some purposely silly things.
Right.
So
I mean, it makes sense because the series has some silliness built into it.
Oh, definitely. And the comics have definitely gone the silly route. So I guess this was published in 2010. And the story is that for some reason, Ash is working at a comic book convention. And for some reason, Barack Obama, while he's president, is visiting a comic book convention.
Presidents have the time for that.
Yeah, I think he was like supposed to give a little speech or something at Comic-Con, which I was like, I don't know why. I don't,
for comic book reasons.
Yes. Now I'm fairly sure, like, okay, so there was an issue of Amazing Spider-Man. I wrote it down. I don't know this off the top of my head, but Amazing Spider-Man 583, where Barack Obama appears in that, and basically, there's a character called the Chameleon, and Spider-Man foils him, and Barack Obama interacts with the other characters, and the Chameleon is impersonating Barack Obama. Okay. Which you're like, oh, that kind of makes sense. Like if you were the Chameleon and you could look like anyone, yeah, the president is someone you might look like.
I buy it.
So, Spider-Man defeats the Chameleon. I think Obama is sort of peripherally involved, like maybe on the level of, he crouches down and Spider-Man pushes somebody over him while he's like, he doesn't like punch someone in the face because I think that's like going too far for them. But
right.
He's like involved in the action.
Okay.
In Army of Darkness, Ash saves Obama. Ash doesn't save Obama, first of all. Barack Obama shows up. And he picks up a book. So throughout the series of Evil Dead and stuff, there's this evil book, the Necronomicon. And somehow the Necronomicon gets sort of transformed into a comic book. And for some reason, Barack Obama picks it up and is like, Sasha and Malia would love this. And, inside the Necronomicon is like demonic writings and blood that's not even in any decipherable language. And like, so he figures that I guess at that time they would have been like young teenage daughters. So
he's doing the dad thing where he's like, comic books are cool.
Yeah.
I'll buy him this.
I think the girls would enjoy this. And he's going to bring it home and they're going to be like, what even is this?
Right. All right.
So he buys
his
this.
Dad moment.
Yeah.
I buy it.
So I guess he buys this and picks it up and is like leafing through it. And somehow that like unleashes the evil that always gets unleashed when people mess around with this book.
Right.
But then what happens is he leaves on Air Force One. He's completely gone. And then Ash fights a bunch of demons who are still there for some reason. And then basically you entirely forget about Barack Obama being in the book. And the end of the book is he gets back to the White House and actually looks through the comic and is like, this is really weird. I'm not going to give this to my teenage daughters. And he throws it in the fire. And that's the end.
Wow. Wow.
And it was, okay, so it was such a letdown for me because I was like, well, this is a bizarre premise. Why not? And like, I thought, okay, I wrote a couple lines for Barack Obama if he had been involved in the action. And the two I came up with was he could like knock out a demon and be like, well, I hope he didn't vote Democrat. And the other one would be, unfortunately for him, affordable health care doesn't cover the undead. But he doesn't fight the demons. He's not even there when demons are being fought. He just mistakenly buys a book that he shouldn't have purchased and then throws it in the fire, closing the loop. Yeah. And then he's not even involved. He doesn't have to do anything.
That does feel like they're abusing the premise a little bit. It's a bait and switch.
It totally felt like that. It feels like if you've ever seen, sometimes like you'll see a movie, right? And it looks like they redid the cover so it looks nice. But then it's like, oh, starring so-and-so, it'll say like starring, there's a horror movie, Horror High or something, and it's like starring George Clooney. George Clooney's in it for like 15 seconds. Is it a young George Clooney? Yes.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
When he's, like even pre being on Roseanne, he's like in a grocery store or something.
Right.
Here's your change, and that's the entirety of George Clooney. Yeah. But that's
like saying the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 starring Jennifer Aniston.
Exactly, yes. And you're like, hey, look, Leprechaun starred Jennifer Aniston. Texas Chainsaw.
Dang it, I got it wrong.
But yeah, and you're like, okay, I guess that's the most famous person who has emerged from this entire cast. But man, he's barely in the movie. And that's like what they did with the comic, except it's baffling because you're like, you can basically have Obama do whatever you want.
Right.
Why not have him do something?
Be present, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe be like in the same state where most of the action's happening would be.
Maybe locked in like the back offices of the convention center, trying to hide from the undead at least.
Yeah, something. I mean, he's like trying to give some kind of rousing speech to like calm the undead somehow. I don't know.
The Independence Day speech.
Yeah, or he has to like have a presidential style debate against the head of the demons and like whoever wins something. I mean, use Barack Obama's skills. Either have him do like presidential stuff that saves the day, or have him do completely wacky non-presidential stuff because that's amusing.
Right.
But something would have been good.
Right. Not have him be there for 5 seconds and then not be there for the rest of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
So I do not recommend Army of Darkness, Ash Saves Obama.
If Obama wasn't in there, it still wouldn't be worth reading.
No, because like the rest of the story is kind of boring, and it's like the same old Evil Dead Army of Darkness story, just kind of condensed and not as well done.
So it was a gimmick that didn't even give you the gimmick.
Yeah, exactly. It like didn't. It was promising a cheap gimmick, and it didn't deliver even that.
Bummer.
Yeah. So I do not recommend it. But there are some other Ash or Army of Darkness comics like Ash in Space or Ash Gets Hitched that are much, much more enjoyable.
Okay.
So that's how I'm going to spin that into a quasi recommendation, I guess. Yeah. I just want everyone else to know how upset I was about a comic from 11 years ago, sort of starring someone 2 presidents ago.
Yeah. Hey, that's okay. I'm still holding a serious grudge against the show Gilmore Girls.
Oh.
And I will never let it go. Oh. So I'm with you.
Because of like how it ended?
Well, yeah. So I'm assuming you probably didn't watch Gilmore Girls.
I have seen most of Gilmore Girls.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not super familiar, but.
I mean, there are definitely things that I wanted to happen in the show that that kind of happened but didn't happen. But the reason that I'm holding a grudge instead of just being disappointed is because I feel like, and it has to do with like politics, Hollywood politics, I think. So they had a certain set of writers on the show for many seasons, and they were developing the show in a certain direction. And then, I think Shonda Rhimes maybe left. There was some sort of shakeup behind the scenes, and the show ended up with new writers. And what it felt like to me as someone who reads a lot and like has a feel for narrative is they spent many seasons developing characters in a certain direction. And then new writers came on and they systematically undid every decision that the previous writers did and left those characters in almost the exact same place they started the series in. Yeah. And I was so bummed.
It from like a, 1,000 feet up view of it, it seemed to me like you have some of the romantic relationships and then the relationship between the mom and the daughter. Mm-hmm. Was kind of, they were on certain trajectories. Oh, and also the mom and her mom.
Yeah.
And then, it seemed like they basically built it up and then just disassembled it. Like, did it in reverse?
Yeah. Yes, that is exactly what happened. And I can roll with shows making decisions I don't like. There are shows that I really, really love that made choices that I wish hadn't happened, but I respect it because it's good storytelling, Yeah. And it made sense and it worked in a way, and I wish it could be different, but like that's how life is sometimes too.
Right.
But this one, it felt like it didn't even make sense. I felt like, we're going to develop characters and then undevelop them. And I don't find that satisfying.
Well, it's like not really, further development. It's just like, it's kind of just doing the same story again, right? In reverse.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's a cheap way to. You could write 3 seasons of a series, but get 6 out of it if you're like, well, then we'll just kind of go backwards.
So I not only didn't get what I wanted out of the show, but I also felt like I didn't get anything of value that I wasn't looking for.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
So I hold a grudge.
Yeah. Maybe that's how I feel about this. It's like an 11-year grudge for a 104 pages of comics. That I'm like, this did not deliver on something that could have been a solid 5 out of 10.
And doesn't really matter anyway, but I'm mad about it.
Yeah. I had really no hopes for it, and I don't know why. I don't know what possessed me to read this at the time I did, but here we are.
Yep.
Well, you know what? I think it's a real badge of honor for this show because it's probably one of the few podcasts or anything that has ever compared the Gilmore Girls to Army of Darkness.
We managed it. Maybe we should just wrap it up here. I'm not sure we can do any better.
I think we've peaked. Do you want to go read your titles and authors again? And
sure.
We had a request to do all 4 of the things that we were recommending. Yes. So
you want me to go through all 4?
Yeah, just real quick.
All right. So the first one that I talked about is Phantom Effect by Michael Aronovitz, which is available as an ebook on Hoopla. The second book that I talked about is Fury by Laurann Dohner, and it is available in print through the library, so you can request that in print. The two that I did not talk about are Night Train by David Quantic, and that is available as an audio ebook through Hoopla, and Death Rides a Chestnut Mare by Ralph Compton, and that is available in print and on Hoopla as an audio ebook.
All right, and the two that I talked about were Clownfellas, Tales of the Bozo Family, by Carlton Malik III. And I talked about Army of Darkness, Ash Saves Obama, by Elliott Serrano. And then the two I didn't get to were Centipede, Volume 1, Game Over, by Max Bemis, and Swordquest, which was written by Roy Thomas and Gerry Conway. And then the art was by the amazing George Perez.
Is that what prompted you to pick it up?
That was a big part of it, to be honest. It's, It's got these like hidden clues embedded in the art, and George Perez is like one of the best.
Cool.
So I was like, maybe this will work. And I was wrong.
Well, we can't get it right all the time.
George Perez has some broad shoulders, and even he could not carry Swordquest on them. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.